Welcome to today's edition of Sankofa Africa Affairs Global and Current Affairs webinar, organized by Bella and Associates Consulting, LLC, Ghana and the USA. My name is Thywill, your host for today, and I'm on call from Accra, Ghana. It's 20th December 2024, 6 p.m. GMT in Accra. Actually, I am in Hann now. I will be co-hosting today's program with Dr. Gloria Ajami, a postdoc researcher at Uppsala University, Sweden, and a literature lecturer at Kenyatta University, Nairobi, Kenya. Dr. Gloria, it's a pleasure to host today's program with you. And thank you all for joining us this evening.
It's a pleasure, Thywill, for introducing me in such a very honorable manner. And as she said, my name is Dr. Gloria Ajami Makoha, and I will be your co-host today alongside Thywill. Today's program is an all-females Sankofa African Affairs virtual discussion. It's 7 p.m. in Uppsala, should be 9 p.m. in Kenya. And hosting this program is actually an opportunity that's very much full of privilege because of the distance and the various countries from where all of us are and are listening in from. For those joining us for the first time, the Sankofa African Affairs webinars serve as a bridge between the African diaspora and the African continent, in line with the AU Declaration of the African Diaspora, serving as the 6th region of the AU. Sankofa African Affairs panel discussions serve as a platform that brings together experts, policymakers, politicians, among others, from the African diaspora and the continent to discuss raging and contemporary issues as it relates to great powers' strategic objectives towards this African continent. Today's discussion topic is addressing gender-based violence for collective societal security and development in Africa. It marks the beginning of Bella and Associates Consulting Limited, the Sankofa discussion series on the challenges of gender-based violence in the wake of femicide and gender-based violence protests in Kenya, which include also the sentencing of Jackton Odhiambo for a 50-year imprisonment for murdering an activist called Edwin Kiprotich in Kenya. And then it's also alongside the development of the African Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls. Thywill.
Thank you, Dr. Gloria, for that wonderful introduction to our discussion today. So, our listeners, our viewers, the Sankofa African Affairs webinar will be framed within the context of the African Union's Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls. This started in a meeting in February 2024, where heads of states and governments committed to support and conclude negotiations and submit a draft convention for adoption by February 2025. Indeed, this convention has two key pillars. One, to establish a comprehensive, legally binding framework for the prevention and elimination of and effective response to all forms of violence against women and girls across Africa by addressing the root causes and drivers of such violence, strengthening the legal and institutional mechanisms, and providing a culture of respect for human rights, gender equality, and the dignity of women and girls. The second pillar is to ensure that state parties reinforce a commonality. I believe that we've worked in this space for a long time, and we need to find a common ground to move as a people. So the second pillar will be hinged on ensuring that state parties reinforce the commonalities of approach to eliminate violence against women and girls while acting as a stimulus for an open narrative and advocacy on violence against women and girls. It is our hope that today's discussion from the West African sub-region will supplement the efforts of state houses around the African continent and to support and conclude negotiations and submit a draft convention for adoption by February 2025. Dear listeners, dear viewers, on the various social media platforms, the Sankofa African Affairs webinar is anchored on merits of perspectives. So there may be differences in our opinions that will be shared by our discussants. Please, if you find these differences, it does not mean that any opinion is wrong. It means that from our various perspectives, this is how we look at the issues. And divergence is the key to achieving success. And so we must accommodate the diverse perspectives that are coming up in these discussions so that together we can have a convergence point to move with this discussion. Thank you for joining us once again. And Dr. Gloria, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Thywill. So the Sankofa African Affairs webinars rely on narratives for its discussion programs, and it's because narratives are an integral part of the African societies. And so in our discussions, we utilize them based on research findings, policy positions, and realities prevailing in various African countries. The narratives help our panelists to present their perspectives independently, which sometimes may diverge from official government or organizational policy positions and doctrines. Today, we are joined by experts from academia, civil society organizations, and the legal profession, research institutions, and the like to help us delve into this topic. These experts are either practitioners or scholars on the particular topic and narrative they are addressing. And they have the narratives with them. They've been having them for a while. So they will be reacting to what we gave them prior, except for the questions. They do not know what we have to ask because we will get the questions from their submissions. So our first panelist today is Dr. Sally Mboumien. Kindly forgive me if I mispronounce your name. Just excuse me for that for today. She is a women, youth, peace and security advocate, a researcher, policy influencer, analyst, and executive director, Common Action for Gender Development in Bamenda, Cameroon. Our second panelist today is Dr. Kotey-Quaye, a cultural anthropologist and sexual and gender advocate based in Atlanta, Georgia, USA. Our third panelist is Ms. Fatou Hann, a gender and development specialist and executive director, Women of Africa, Conakry, Guinea. Our fourth panelist and the last one for the day is Mrs. Fatima Ashimia Forna-Conteh, a lawyer and sexual-based violence advocate based in Freetown, Sierra Leone. So right now we will welcome the opening remarks from our panelists, and each of them must be placed within the context of the recent femicide and gender-based violence protests in Kenya, because this could have a rippling effect across the African continent. Back to you, Thywill.
Thank you very much. So we will pick our opening remarks from our panelists, and we will go from Dr. Sally. If you have any brief opening remark, we'll take it before we enter into the narratives. So we take brief opening remarks from each of our panelists to introduce the discussion, and then we will move into the narratives. So Dr. Sally, if you have any brief opening remarks within the context of the current recent femicide and gender-based violence protests in Kenya, any brief view on that, then we move into our narratives.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting me over to participate in this very important conversation that I hope at the end of the day, we could be able to shape policy issues, discuss and share practice in the field, as well as move forward with the continuous battle of discussing femicide. My initial statements will be that when we look at the issues in Kenya, we are slapped in the face by the double standards of our communities and society when they talk about issues of femicide. Because in every position that we stand, people stand to exonerate themselves that they are gender activists, they are rights activists, they believe in equality, they believe in all the good things. And I think what happened in Kenya is just a glaring example of lip service that characterizes the conversation around gender equality. Unfortunately, given the fact that our communities are built on patriarchal structures, which has unfortunately crept its way into policy and governance within our communities, it is very pathetic that those who sit in power in numbers usually are those who are privileged. Like with patriarchy, we have male dominance that characterizes even policies of our different countries. So you will see the crackdown on the femicide protests in Kenya to be politicians defend it, that they were looking at the protest as a potential threat to peace and security within Kenya. But I would say it's a lie, because they felt like their power was being taken away by a group of brave women who were speaking truths to power. So in this remark, I would say, if we want to peel this conversation about sexual gender-based violence, we should look at how deeply rooted it is put in our systems, because our systems and institutions have internalized these inequalities. That's why you could see that kind of crackdown on people who are bringing facts and statistics. When I looked at it, I felt so bad, because like in Cameroon, we have a fellow sister who is well accomplished, a university lecturer, but who succumbed to death from femicide and was killed by her partner. Honestly, very few people talked about it. So all of these things are our daily reality that I feel that in the process, I'll be able to give examples and further details within my own community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Sally. As I said, this is just the opening remarks. So I believe we will keep it brief so that we could go into the narrative itself. So I'll move on quickly, and I'll call Mrs. Hann to also give your brief opening remark. Mrs. Hann? Are you on call? Okay, let's move on to Dr. Kotey. If you are here and you want to give a brief remark, just a brief remark, opening remark. You can just say hello to us and we move on.
Hello, greetings to everybody. I do understand the passion from the other panelists. So, but I'll just say that for me, human rights, whether it's female, whether it's male, whatever it is, human rights is what I champion for. So that is what we're going to talk about today, and I'm excited to be here to represent possible voices that may be swept under the rug on this discussion in femicide in our continent. Okay, so that's me. Dr. Kotey-Quaye. You know, I'm here. Let's talk about it.
Thank you for being here with us. Doc, thank you so much for being here with us. Lawyer Conteh, are you here with us too? would you want to give us a
Yes.
brief opening remark?
Yes.
Yes, please. Please, let's have
Yes.
your brief opening remark.
Yes, what is happening in Kenya is a slap to the justice system. As a woman and as a female advocate for SGBV, the delay in implementing policies to stop what is happening, and when it comes to things like this, the faster we act, the better we put things in place. And that will be dealt with when we go into proper discussion. For now, if I start talking, I won't stop because it's a lot. So I'll stop here for now.
You have a lot to talk about in the course of the discussion.
I have a lot to say.
So I will hold you for now, and then we can move into the discussion. I believe that is where the meat of the whole thing is. So thank you very much, everybody, for the opening, those wonderful opening remarks. Now we want to move on quickly to our narratives. And we want to take the first narrative. And this narrative was sent to Dr. Sally Mboumien. I hope I had that correct. Doc, did I get that correct? All right. So we will have our first major presentation from Dr. Sally. If you don't mind, I'll just go for the Dr. Sally and then we can move on. So Dr. Sally, from your narrative, which was present to you, we want to find out what we mean when we are talking about sexual and gender-based violence. We have a lot of viewers on our Facebook streaming. We have some on YouTube. We have some on call here with us. There are diverse participants here, but we just want to give a background to what we are really discussing so that we can all come along. And so I want you to give us some idea about what we mean when we are talking about gender-based violence. We also want you to give us the forms in which they are presented. And then we also want to look at some of the intersectional factors that drive sexual and gender-based violence within the African continent, particularly within the West African continent, West African region. So, Dr. Sally, those will be your focus in your major submission this evening. Thank you. So you can pick up the discussion now. And please, I have the right to interrupt you.
Yeah.
So we can stay on course. Thank you very much.
You should always read that. Good evening once more. I want all of us to first of all acknowledge that when we discuss issues of gender-based violence, it comes with a lot of emotional package, because in a way, everybody has had or experienced or seen what gender-based violence is. This is a daunting task for me to have at times given a definition of gender-based violence, because gender-based violence vary from context to context and what people perceive it to be. So I'll be trying to talk around the issues and see how we can at least align with any existing definition of gender-based violence. Now, the key components, there is the gender component in it, and all of us, we agree that gender components vary from community to community, what gender is, and with the evolution of all conversations about gender, it's no longer the binary of male or female. There are different issues that come into being, which also is participating in gender issues in Africa. We also are looking at violence, which I love the submission of Dr. who said to her, it's human rights concern. Violation is a human rights concern. So these are two very big and very intriguing issues that we put them together. Gender leading to violence. You have violence because of a particular gender. The big question is, who classifies all of this? So gender-based violence, broadly put, that's some people will say sexual gender-based violence. Some people will say gender-based violence. Looking at the broad spectrum of what happens within West Africa as a region, you realize that people use gender-based violence and sexual gender-based violence interchangeably, which has to do with any harm, maltreatment, denial of opportunity, denial of access to resources on basis of your gender. That is the first step. Now, going to gender, how do we get gender issues discussed in our context? In most of our contexts, gender is aligned with your sex, which is more biological and natural within the West African context. I want to repeat that expression, West African context, because within West African context, it is believed that we have male and female, and then now with the conversation of different hormonal changes, where we now are having like transgender and all of those other conversations that come into it, our society decided to now start having these alignments to this, the way they perceive your sex that you were born. Now it becomes the opinion of each community. I say this always because some issues that we consider as gender norms in Cameroon, for instance, in Ghana, that's not considered. The Ghanaian community does not look at that as issues of gender. So I would say that gender-based violence now are acts of violation that are perpetrated on people. It can be harm, like physical violence, the beat you, emotional, that causes harm, or threats to your life, like I said, denial of resources on the basis that they are judging you that, oh, she is female, she's not qualified. Oh, she is male, she's not qualified. Most often, these things are embedded in social norms, which most of us have internalized and taken it as natural, as normal, because they exist in our social norms. And in the acculturation process, socialization process, you normalize them, you internalize them. So that's why if you talk about gender-based violence in my community, you tell a woman that, look, it is not proper for you to expect that your husband must build a house and put you to live in that house. This house, construction of a family house, should be on basis of income. Who is earning what, and then you contribute for the family to have a family house. A typical woman from my community will not internalize that because she has been socialized to understand that a man is the head. And because he is the head, he is the provider. So it is all of these issues that comes together to talk about gender-based violence. I'll go forward to say that gender-based violence, there are different forms. There are different forms of gender-based violence. You have physical violence, which is what people feel that they must see, so they understand and accept that there is violence. To them, violence is punching, whipping, kicking, to say that that's
your
violence.
internet connection is unstable.
Please, we have some interruption from
Is it my internet connection, sir?
Oscar.
Is it my internet connection?
No, please go on. Please go on.
All right. So
Yeah.
I talked about the physical violence, economic violence that has to go with resource distribution of resources or access to opportunities. When we look at pay packages in different institutions, you see issues of gender-based violence. There are some institutions or organizations where maybe a woman cannot lead. And in these days, there are people, there's a new normal within the West African continent where activists have decided to say that in their spaces, only women will lead. That is some sort of violation of men who are also capable. There is also psychological violence that has to come with the words that we express out there to others. Now, this is materialized and externalized, we see daily, in forms of domestic violence, intimate partner violence. These are things we have. Sexual violence, which you have rape, that stands out, and then you have acts of sexual assault, which comes with issues of power dynamics. So I feel I'm just packing everything together and taking it down. Now, when you have these different trees, because we have had the roots, we have had the trunk of it, which is manifesting in these different forms, then you have issues of rape, battery, intimate partner violence, denial of access even to health services. Women don't go to health services, family planning services where their spouses do not want or their partners. Then it now comes down to why do we have this? is because of inequalities that are embedded in our social norms. Like I said in my intro, that was a bit long, let me cut it and say, traditionally, we have a setup where a group of persons in our community, by virtue of most of our cultures, are accorded a lot of power and opportunity. Now, that same culture pushes young women and women to prove themselves to be women. But as a man, it is given. When you are born as a man, you earn the opportunities, the power, and the rights. But now the system makes it in a way that women need to prove themselves. The expectations are high. The stakes are very high, that sometimes women even get confused in the middle what to do. Because when you work hard and become successful, oh, you're out of the goods. No, you're not wife material, you're not this. That's the custom you're talking about. Sometimes when you become docile, they say, oh, you've just submitted yourself to violence. That is what I mean by the African continent within West Africa. The woman has to prove herself. Now, this great power imbalance is what is causing all of these difficulties, because you now realize that even your act of political participation, it's now affected because of these gender issues in your community. You either want to run for office, and then your sexual life as a woman becomes the conversation. Because if I were to run for office today, if I had dated a man 15, 20 years back, it would be the conversation on media rather than the political manifesto that I'm putting out there. So these are the disparity in the gender conversations that we are having. And then I want to speak to another angle that it's a growing body of information that we need to keep debunking and investigating within academia, which is the act of prejudice. A lot of people have prejudice towards gender conversation because there is the high misconception that gender issues are women's issues. And when they take this misconception of gender issues being women's issues, then the angle which doctor said human rights concern is no longer touched. That's why when bills are done by civil society actors within Africa, West Africa, in each country like Cameroon, they did the family code. That particular law is yet to go through parliament because a male-dominated parliament feels that the family code, if it goes through, it is for women. So these are the misconceptions that has now breed a very poor socioeconomic class, limited political participation for some, which is women, and then perpetrators of gender-based violence sometimes are covered by the institutions and the systems. Most of the violations that take place in workspaces, like offices, people really don't talk about it because economically, we need to eat. When a woman gets a job, it's like it's her future. When she gets violated, she's afraid to talk because she will be sent out of it. Even at that, you are a woman, you work so hard, but they need your body to add to that expertise to be able to promote you. So these are the deep-rooted issues. What does this now mean to our daily life? When it comes to all of these violations, we realize that people now grow up, become our leaders with greed. Inequalities is normal.
Okay, Dr. Sally, I think I'll hold you there because there are other narratives that will address the impact.
Okay.
And so I'll hold you right there. And then I'll move quickly to the other discussants to see if they have some perspectives, brief ones, to share on the definition, the intersectional factors, and the forms. And then we can move to the next narrative where we will look at the impact from another panelist. Thank you very much. That was really insightful. Thank you so much. So I want to move quickly, and I want to go to Dr. Kotey. Should I come to you? I want to come to you.
Yeah, come to me.
Yes.
Let's see what I talk about.
I want to look at this when Dr. Sally was making her presentation, she mentioned the fact that power relations is a driving force of sexual and gender-based violence. Now, if that is the case, In countries like the US, the UK, we've seen a lot of bridging of the gaps in gender relations. I believe there may be other forms of power at play, but I want to pick your perspective. Is that the case? And if that is the case, it means that there should be limited number of violence in the developed countries as compared to West Africa. But we see that it happens across cultures, across borders, and everywhere we see them. And I also believe that there are other intersectional factors that draws on the power relations that leads to gender-based violence. We want to pick your thoughts on that.
All right. Okay. So thank you so much for coming to me. And thank you, Dr. Sally. I really appreciate the passion. I really do. So I was listening attentively, as she said, and she did say something I repeated, and I will repeat that throughout this conversation, which is the issue of human rights. Okay, because again, to me, I don't want the conversation to be violence in relations only to females, because with the different definitions of gender that is coming, whether we like it or not, West Africa is no longer an isolated island. Okay, we are connected to the rest of the world, which means we are connected to the West, right? And the West, they are going to have different ideas of gender. Asian cultures are going to have different ideas of gender. I'm a cultural anthropologist, so for me, culture comes into play in all of this. Now, the definition whereby Ms. Sally alluded to that, you also mentioned that we're talking about sexual gender violence, gender-based violence in the context of power. I'm a very holistic type of a person in all attributes of my life. I'm the definition of wholeness. I really have a difficult time ever attributing something to only one factor. Okay, because when you work with culture, you realize that any little adjustment in any of the structures of the society affects something else. Okay, so that is the approach that I'm going to be looking at all this that we're talking about. I am going to look at a holistic perspective. And yes, I believe that strictly in certain cases, when you look at gender-based violence, is definitely backed by issues of power. Okay, but I think in other cases where we look at the US, sometimes in the US, yes, women may be able to make the equivalent of money just as a man would do, but still, we do have perpetrations of gender-based violence that is, towards women. Talk about the psychological aspect of it, right? Where women may have power, all right, but then actually that becomes a negative, right? And Dr. Sally did say that when a woman does too well, right, all of a sudden she becomes a man. The men are, you try having a PhD and be a single West African woman and try to get married in our society. Only a few men have the courage to step up because they don't want to be seen as the wife, right? So in this case, you can see that it's not necessarily about attaining power. If that's the case, then gender-based violence is going to be very, very easy to deal with, right? Because what's going to happen is that all of us women, we're going to work very hard and we're going to earn our own money and we're going to do so well, right? And then we're going to get the respect and the treatment that men have, correct? But we can see that in the West is not necessarily so, okay? So I like to propose that there are other factors. And again, because of a cultural anthropologist, I'm going to say that there's a lot of culture aspects when it comes to gender-based violence, okay? Because societies, and she did say that, patriarchal societies, most societies, we only have a few percentage of the world that are matrilineal type of societies. Truth be told, we don't really see this gender-based violence in those type of societies. So again, I am led to come back and say that along with the power is also the patriarchal type of systems which perpetuates male dominance, right? So that's another cause of gender-based violence. Okay.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you very much.
That's where I'm going with it. For me, the whole thing is like a circle, right? Because you have to look at the structure of the system. you know, when you talk about what is the definition, how is it perpetuated? And then they come again and again. And so it's a circle. So we are going to go circle, circle, circle. But I promise you, at some point, we all hope that we can get to a point where every human being is going to be accorded the respect that they deserve, whether male, female, in between, third gender, fourth gender, whatever it is. That is the goal of this discussion, I believe. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So we initially said that we are framing this on the AU convention, the proposed convention that is supposed to be adopted in February 2025. And this convention looks at women and girls. Sometimes people ask why women and girls. Now, one of the issues when it comes to intersections will be age. When you come to us, age is a key issue. When you are a girl and you are a woman, then it becomes more entrenched. And so there are other factors. I want to quickly move to Lawyer Conteh if she has some views to share on this perspective. Thank you.
Yes.
Conteh, you have some views to share on this?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. When it's to SGBV and sexual offenses in particular, because of the religious norms we have in Africa, many people think it's okay because a girl child is above 13 years, they have the right, or because the girl child has grown breasts and stuff like that, they have the child to have sexual intercourse. Lack of education is another thing that is affecting. They do not know, based on my experience working in this field, the major cause of some of these things is lack of education. People do not know that what they are doing is an offense. Most of the time when it comes to communication and educating people on stuff like SGBV, it is very centralized. People in the capital know what is SGBV, what is GBV, but when you move to the provinces, they don't. They do not know, they do not have knowledge in some of these things. So that is why, for Sierra Leone, for example, hello?
Yes.
For Sierra Leone, for example.
We are with you.
Yes, for Sierra Leone, for example. In recent cases, most of the cases that we are having when it comes to SGBV, they are coming from the provinces. We have very few or limited cases coming from the capital because of social media and social interaction, the message is now getting out there. Though we have some challenges when it comes to the justice system, which I must say, but a lot of improvement is taking place.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And she's mentioned very important factors, intersectional factors that can drive gender-based violence. She mentioned religion. In fact, within the West African continent, we are very religious. And I won't lie to you, it drives violence at a point. She mentioned education, very important. The level of
train that's taking our resources out. That's $1 million train you see in Pathway.
Educational barriers.
$1 million
The least educated are more affected, and people who do not know about their rights, they are also very much affected. Then she also spoke about location, geographical location. And this could be common because in Ghana, it is also the case. And then we also look at age. Thank you very much for those wonderful perspectives. And I believe that we will move on to the next narrative, and then we will unearth the other issues. But before then, I want to welcome Mrs. Fatou Hann. I learned she's joined us. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Sorry for being late. As I'd announced, I'm on the road on a mission, so network wasn't on my side. Very happy to be here, and greetings to everybody.
Thank you. Nonetheless, we are happy you joined us. So we just
Thank you.
finished with a definition of gender-based violence and some of the drivers. And then we
Okay,
want to
great.
pick your quick
Mhm.
opening statements. If you have anything to share concerning what we just discussed, a quick opening statement, and then I will hand over to Dr. Ajami to take the next narrative.
Okay. Just maybe say that I'm in Guinea. So Guinea is in West Africa, between Senegal, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, Liberia, Guinea-Bissau, anyways. We are sharing a lot of the same context as our neighbors, as far as cultural norms, the hierarchy, of norms, of social norms, and also the context of gender-based violence, unfortunately. So it's widespread. Like in other countries, there's not enough cases that are brought to justice up to now. And however, the response is improving as far as what the government has been doing in the past few years to improve services for the victims. But
Thank
I will
you.
stop as for my opening statement. Just say that we are very much sharing the same context as our neighboring countries in West Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I will give the final word back to Dr. Sally. Dr. Sally, you will conclude for us in the next 30 seconds.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed the different contributions that have been made. So we will say here together that we are agreed on the fact that gender-based violence or sexual gender-based violence is harm that is perpetrated to other people or threat to other people, denial of resources on basis of perceived, I love the word perceived, what their gender is or their sex is, or their age is, their religious orientation is. So these are these issues that links first on sex and now transcends to add these other elements. I think all of us are agreed on that. And we are also agreed on the fact that the drivers of gender-based violence has to be cultural, education, religion, the social norms that we deal with. And finally, we are saying that because of all of these, it breeds inequalities and injustice, which now plays on human rights, affects our security and our development. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I hand over to Dr. Ajami for the next narrative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thywill. So before I get to the next narrative, there's something that Dr. Sally clearly brought out that is also something that affects this discussion in general. She said that there's prejudice towards gender when it comes to this kind of a discussion, that it involves women and girls, and then the perspective of the man and the boy is left out. So carefully in this panel, we're also having an all-women kind of conversation, and this is intentional because you're having a series of these discussions forthcoming. So Dr. Sally, please don't think about violating what we should have done earlier. We will be looking forward for the next series.
Edition, yeah.
Yes. So now I'm moving to Dr. Kotey, and her narrative is based on the inaction against gender-based violence as a threat to sustainable development. Dr. Na, there are studies from the World Health Organizations which estimate that 1 in every 3 women have intimate partner violence or sexual violence from a non-partner perpetrated against them in their lifetime. Then there's also the early marriage. And then it's estimated that at least 200 million girls could be subjected to harmful practices. And then there's a study by the IMF that finds that a percentage of 1% of women subjected to violence can reduce their productivity to up to 8 0.7% in sub-Saharan Africa. You are in the United States, and you have the United States Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and they estimate that the cost of intimate partner rape, physical assault, and stalking exceeds 5.8 billion each year. So I need to hear your submission on this. Is it the inaction, or there's something else that is causing a big threat to sustainable development with the gender aspect in mind?
Okay, so are you referring to that in context of West Africa or in the US?
West Africa first, and then we try to bring it out.
I do believe that in terms of the action, it is an issue, okay, especially when it comes to West Africa. Main reason is that we have a lot of cultural basis that perpetuates the idea of male dominance, okay? And when it comes to, let's just talk about the words that are used, male dominance. What is the opposite of dominance? Right? Submission. So thereby, if the society is perpetuating male dominance, that means women are required to submit. Okay. Again, we're going to talk about the definition of words, because again, words are very important. What is submission, right? What does submission mean? Does it mean that, is it a violent act? I grew up in West Africa, so I do remember that when we went to school, teachers were able to really whoop us when we did bad things. We were caned, okay? Because if the teacher said this and you don't submit and you don't do it, if you don't obey it, what happens? You get caned. That's violence, right? So from an early age, we do learn that, you know, and we come from a society where there's a lot of parents in the West. I live in the West now, so a lot of times I have to play with my words very carefully, right? Because, of course, my view is different now because I have lived out of Ghana. I'm from Ghana, out of West Africa for such a long time that a lot of times, and I left the country when I was about 16. So a lot of my growing up has been here. So I'm not quick to say that when parents discipline their children is abuse. I've not gone that far yet, okay? But because I grew up, you know, my mother disciplined me, and I know my mother loves me very much. So for her, when I try religion again, for her, the idea of discipline, he said that she quotes me the Bible, say, spare the rod and spoil the child. I can't believe I remember that. These things are ingrained. So, so for her, she was doing the right thing by the cultural standards. She was doing it out of love, right? Now, I'm going to shock you. I'm a God person, and I know that in the context of marriage, when women are getting married, they are really encouraged to go and what? Submit to their husbands. I've heard a term actually being used that, yeah, chose implies discipline, guidance. You understand? So it's like you, the girl, when you go to marry, you go from your family house where your parents and your siblings are in charge of you to a home where now the husband and his people, because we tended to be communal societies, not only him, but his mother, his parents, his siblings, all of them get to help you grow. Now, this was fine because maybe you were getting married at a very early age, but imagine when you are a 30-year-old female, you have gone around the world, you have gone to university, you have done all those things. It really, really brings a lot of challenges, right? What does it mean to submit? And if you don't submit, then you become a bad wife, a bad woman, right? So we have to really, really look at culture when we talk about how the West deals with gender-based violence, and again, how our West Africa countries are dealing with it. It's a challenge, and I'm always going to say that because they are a developing nation, right? The West has gone through all its challenges and is now, so we're not there yet, right? So we have to be careful when it comes to the words we are using. Again, I'll come back to human rights, right? Whether it's a boy child that is being abused, whether it's a female child that's being abused, abuse for me, anything that you wouldn't want anybody to do to you, when you do to somebody else, is an abuse. If you slap me, I won't like it. So I'm not gonna slap you, right? If we start looking at this gender-based violence right from the start and we make it more an issue of human rights, I believe that more people can come to the table to comfortably talk about it, right? And also, we want to, especially in the case of West Africa, because like you said, it is very costly. And I think that the inaction for me, I believe is strictly, it's culture. I really think it's culture because, Dr. Sally said, a lot of times they don't even know that they are doing the wrong things. And education too, because you do have girls who, when in the US, you have it when they are not being hit by their partner, they think, oh, they don't love me. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of education, whether West Africa or even the West, because I'm talking about women thinking that their husbands don't love them because they don't get hit. This is the West as well as West Africa. So inaction is, I think, is contributed by the culture of male dominance. Okay. And then again, I'm going to go into circle. What perpetuates it? It's upholding I'm a man, right? Some men are even looked down on because they are not the type that are aggressive. And in West Africa, you hear a lot, stop being like a girl. In fact, let me take that back. Even in the West, when fathers are dealing with their sons, they will tell them, stop acting like a girl. If somebody panics and they cry, oh, you cry like a girl, So the language around it, so it's just the whole thing is a cycle, and it just keeps perpetuated by one, and it comes and then it goes, and then the boys grow up and they do the same thing, and woe unto you if you're a male and you do not support that male dominance, then you become a woman, right? So I believe inaction is part of the reason, but it's based on the culture that surrounds it, right? So I feel like I was saying a lot. I don't know if I addressed what you wanted me to address. So ask me more if you need me to expatiate more, okay, please.
Okay, so before I get to the other panelists, if they have questions for you or opinions, I'll start off with myself. Now that you have ably said that inaction goes back to culture and that is the problem, what would you, as a specialist, recommend as actions? Because in Kenya, we saw the other day women were out protesting against femicide, and the police were very quick to tear gas them off the streets. So that would be their version of the action they are taking, maybe from that point, if they're listened to the next level. But from a professional point of view, what are some of the actions you would recommend?
I believe it's dialogue. And I also think that we have to engage the males in the society and it starts from women as well, because who raised those boys to become male dominated, right? And I'm not gonna, put all of it on women, but the truth of the matter is, especially in West Africa, my goodness, women have a lot of power when it comes to raising the men that they want. I'm a Ga person, and I'm always fighting with a lot of Ga women that, especially their firstborns, oh goodness, their firstborns are like their gods in their house. So woe unto you if you marry. I'm not, okay, nobody should come and call me, say, Dr. Na was, crucifying firstborn males, but they are so powerful in their family homes that when they go to marriage, oh my God, my mother calls them, I put it to you type of people. Every time the wife do something, I put it to you, and it's like they must be dominant because they were raised to be the leaders of their family, right? So no woman is going to come to their house and even suggest something or anything of the sort, right? So let us start with women. But I think that in terms of what I would suggest is that we need to take a community approach, okay? It affects everybody, whether they like it or not. If men will be honest to themselves, if their sister is being abused or experiencing violence, it affects them. They feel it. So if they feel it because their sister is being hurt, why would you do it to somebody else's sister? So I always encourage males that no matter whenever you start thinking any type of derogative ideas about females, you know, whatever it is, think my mother is a female. My sister is a female. And someday I'm going to have a child, a daughter, she'll be a female, right? So you will protect these three people with your life. Do the same for every other female that you come across. I think that, you know, would really, really help all of us, the whole society, because as you did mention, it is a costly, economically, it costs a lot when females don't have the peace of mind to do their job that they are supposed to do to come in and to contribute to society, right? So it's costing all of us. It's costing all of us. So let us get more. I'm a proponent of or advocate for programs that incorporate the community, because I don't believe that the West has to come in and tell, you know, West Africans, do it this way, do it this way. No, it will not work. Because some of these things, as we see, for example, female early child marriages, as well as female female circumcision, if I may use that term. These are cultural, right? And again, if you remove one thing without really incorporating the society, everything is gonna go haywire. Because, for example, if the West come and say, hey, no more female circumcision, we're gonna do it violently. You cannot do this. You can't. Guess what? You're gonna have a lot of unmarried, uncircumcised women in their societies, because the men are gonna be like, okay, I don't want her because she's not, you know, circumcised. Am I making sense? So I think it is all of our problem, if I may use that term, right? Gender-based violence is not only a female issue. It is a human rights issue. We are all involved. So everybody, including the law, right? Police, they have mothers, they have sisters, they have daughters. How would they feel if their daughters and mothers were the ones who were, you know, tear gassed on, right? Or whatever they did to them? They wouldn't feel good about it, right? So if they are involved, right, with understanding the program and everything, I think we're gonna have better results. Okay. So I want to stop here, but I'm listening attentively, and I'm so excited to be here. I just like the fact that we are talking about it, right? Because a lot of times, even when you talk about it, you become a target, right? I'm in the West, so I can really talk about, you know, a lot of these things, but I know that some of my sisters, they are not in the West, and even talking about it, you become a target. I become a target, you know, when I talk about, you know, gender-based violence, and I include, you know, the, you know, LGBT community, because people think, oh, she's probably one of them. Oh, I'm not a man, but let a man be abused, I'm gonna step up, because it's a human rights issue. Okay, so thank you for now, and allow me to bring my contributions to the table.
Okay, thank you very much. We start with Dr. Sali. Do you have, in just 30 seconds, do you have a response to Na?
30 seconds. What am I going to say in 30 seconds? Okay. All right. I think that what she said is perfectly in order, but I will just add one thing. Maybe we revisit the education and sensitization strategy that we have been employing for so long to discuss these issues in our community. Because I feel that we have a lot of laws, instruments, policies, global, national, and regional, that is not still giving us the results we are looking for. Maybe I think it's time for us to flip the script. What are we saying that we should say differently? Because, you know, issues of power, when you want to shift power, you don't shift power by force. You shift power by moving along with people. That's the first thing I will add. Building on what she said, I also think that we should acknowledge that gender concerns are anchored on the mind, and shifting mindset is a whole journey, because that mind that you're shifting is the same mind that is raising another mind. So you have to be very careful. I feel like radical feminism and toxic masculinity did not help the entire process of discussing this impact in our community. I'm speaking about how to address this issue. I think I will, at the top of my finger, say, flip the script, speak more to positive masculinity while addressing toxic masculinity. Also, acknowledge the mindset of people. Nobody lets go the power they have. And also acknowledge the strength and weakness of whichever practice we are talking about. There are women who are very comfortable with gender-based violence because to them, it comes with it a security package. They have a husband, they are happy they have one, so he can beat them and buy them a new piece of clothing and a beautiful gown and handbag. It's just okay to go with. With these same gender issues, there comes a man who believes that his wife can work money, but should not talk about how it is spent. So these are all the intrigues about what we are discussing, and we have to be very conscious about it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We move to Ms. Fatou. Hann, do you have any contribution to what Dr. Na has given us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can.
Okay, thank you. I pray that the network remains stable. I concur with pretty much everything that was said. And going back on the cultural aspect, you know, I'm always very careful on the balance of the cultural aspect. For me, I put it very much on the social because I'm very proud of my culture, African culture. And I think that African culture and values are actually very good values. And I was raised with them and they brought me up in a way that I'm very proud of my education. So sometimes when I hear people saying, yeah, it's cultural, I feel a bit bad because I feel like we're downplaying our culture. While I think that our real culture is actually protective of women and not violent at all. Actually, non-violence is universal for me and it has nothing to do with culture, but violence has to do with, like someone just said, the wrong mindset that we've been able to raise with in our communities, and also the power balance. And like someone said, it's very hard to let go of power, but you can still hold power and not be violent. You don't have to have power, and your power doesn't mean that you need to disempower someone. So I think that there is just a balance that we need to rework, and a narrative in our communities, African communities, to come back to our values, to our main and basic values, to say, look, these main and basic values, they're actually protective of women, you know, and you're not going to take us into, I mean, let us stay in these supposedly traditional and cultural and religious narrative of, because of religion, because of culture, because of this, you need to be violent against us. So I think that it's very much about changing the narrative, the mindset, like someone said it, but it's also about more and more attacking the social setup, coming with patriarchal rules that we've been, you know, kind of, I'm sorry to use that term, but brainwashed with, or at least not even the term, but the whole scheme, you know. And I don't yet have the right solution, because obviously we've been, like someone said, we've been working a lot of strategies and things are not moving fast enough as we would like to, because gender-based violence is very widespread in Africa, everywhere we are. But to me, we need to come back to our communities. We need to talk to our communities and, like someone said, change the mindset. And the mindset has to go with education. I don't think that human mind can think that it's okay to be violent, and it's okay to be violent against a woman, because women are, like we're always saying and celebrating in our culture and communities, they are the mothers, they're the sisters, they are this and that. So for me, I don't know, like most of you, we've been working a lot for the longest time on many things, but for me, we need to reframe and also really be ourselves in some ways violent in attacking the status quo that is trying to keep the women where they are today in our communities.
Thank you very much. Clearly, there's need to keep this conversation going. Lastly, lawyer Forna-Conteh, do you have any contribution to this very briefly before we move to the next narrative?
Yes, I agree with what the former panelists just said. And in addition to that, I believe that most of these abuses were passed to us through cultural practices. Before modernization, we were taught that as a woman, you should be submissive. And what we were taught by our grandmothers, being submissive simply means that you should be beaten by your husband. Even when you are not ready to have sex, your husband have the right to forcefully have sex with you. And all of these things, if your husband said that, oh, you cannot pursue, you should not go to school, because first, I have a very close relationship with my grandmother, and she's a very brilliant woman. Sometimes when we are talking, she told me that my husband stopped me from going to school. I'm like, eh? He stopped you from going to school, and he is an educated man. And it was okay. Nobody fought for you. And some of these practices is what the whole idea of GBV is embedded in. Imagine that these men are raising boys who are becoming men in society. Even though modernization is taking place, it is, for me, most of the time I say it is well dressed. These cultural practices are well dressed now. You see an educated man telling you that if I want to have sex with you, even if you say no, you're supposed to do it because you are my wife. We have legislation prohibiting that. It's an offense. We have cultural practices, religious practices, all of them bringing this gender-based violence. It's too much. So most of the time when I get to talk about these things, I get emotional because I get to see them every day in my work life. Every day. Sometimes I have to live in the victim's space because the stories, they keep coming and coming and coming.
Thank you very much. We are glad you're here so that you continue speaking to us from the legal angle. So, Dr. Na, we're back to you. We need you to have the final word on this one before we move to the next narrative. And our guests, our esteemed members who are listening in, you also have the chance to ask questions. We will give you that chance at the end of the program. But meanwhile, if you have a pressing question, you can just type it in the message, then we'll get to read it and they will address it before we close up. Dr. Na, please.
Oh, hello, I'm back. I've been listening, smiling and grinning and making faces. I'm guilty. I just don't know how to listen without making faces. But I do appreciate all the honesty and the openness of the discussion. I do want to say a few things. I'm not biased against any other cause as for gender-based violence. And when I talk about culture, Ms. Fatou said that she tries to, kind of shy away from using culture as a basis because it makes us look bad, it makes our culture look bad. Okay. And you did say that it's a mindset. I just want to say that mindset is culture. People have the mindset that they have because they live in a certain culture. Okay. Culture, you really, really have to look at it. Trust me, I'm a proud African woman. Anybody who knows me would know that. Carry myself. I rejected my English name. After I came to the West, I said, what is this? I don't need to carry this so-called baptismal name. I haven't had a name before I was born, so I went back, I took it. So I'm a proud African woman. I'm very proud of my culture, our culture as a people. But I do realize that we do have some cultural practices that are not favoring women, okay? Same, there are some cultural practices that are not favoring men, okay? I'm an advocate for change, right? It's not about insulting our culture or doing away with it. No, I am a proud African. I will always be a proud African, but I will speak against things that are embedded in our cultures that I believe are holding us back as a people. Whether it's abusing of men or women, children, LGBT communities, anything that affects any person. I mean, it's very easy to tell. when something is done to you, it does not feel good. If you do it to somebody, they are not rocks, they are not ions, they are also human beings, flesh and blood. Same way affects you, it affects them. Okay, so with that said, I do believe that our culture is important. It is dear. It has raised me to be a strong person, individual that has responsibilities. I wanted to take my child to go and be raised in Africa because I say, hey, I was raised in a way that I can survive under a rock anywhere in the world because of the cultural values that were instilled in me as a Ghana woman. Okay. But at the same time, I also recognize there are some features of our West African culture that is not right, encouraging women, that is stopping women from going as far as they are. I'll give you a great example to end here is that when a woman in West Africa, no matter whatever achievement she has gained, you will hear people say, oh, she's a wonderful lawyer, but this woman never made a child. As if that is our glory as women, to make a child. Right? So I'm going to end that. And that is a cultural statement that, oh, this woman, she's great. Then they'll ask, what about her children? She didn't make children, but she's a lawyer. She delivered people, she saved people, she did this, she's a doctor, she did all that. So I love my culture. So Miss Fatou, don't ever get me wrong. And I'm going to be friends with you because we have a lot to talk about. But culture is a mindset. Okay, and that's what I want to end up with. Okay, so thank you again for giving me my portion. Continue to listen intensively and then continue from there. Thank you.
You're welcome. Over to you, Thywill.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to our discussants. Yes, when it comes to gender-based violence, I agree with Ms. Hann that culture is very important. However, there are also components of our culture that drives violence. For example, in Ghana, when you go to northern Ghana, there is a culture that permits abduction of girls for marriage. It's cultural. And so as we experience social change, we need to identify those components that really violates the rights of people. In my community, for example, we had what we call the Trokosi practice, where girls are taken to the shrine to serve, and then by 12 years becomes the wife of the priestess or the priest. So there are aspects of culture that really we can look at as a people, whilst we protect those that are positive, those that promote our well-being, and those that drives us as human beings. And so, yes, culture is dynamic. And as we go on, we need to understand some of these things and also ensure that no matter what, our culture does not subjugate us as human beings. Thank you very much. So we move quickly to the next narrative. And my respondent will be Mrs. Hann. And we are going to look at, in your narrative, we want to look at the preventing and response to gender-based violence through stakeholder and community engagements. We know in the beginning, Dr. Sally wanted to go into stakeholder and community engagement, and I said we will come back to that. So I want to find out, Ms. Fatou, please, is that correct? Ms. Fatou, are you on call?
Fatou, T-U, make it T-U. F-A-T-U, make it
Okay,
T-U.
Fatou, are you on call?
Yeah,
You
my
are.
network
Thank
is in
you
and out,
very
but
much.
I'm here.
Thank you very much. So you are a gender and development specialist working with women. I would want to find out how the work on gender-based violence at community level goes? What are the responses of community members, stakeholders, community leaders? How do they respond to gender-based violence? And then I would also want you to touch on some of the institutional frameworks or institutional responses when it comes to gender-based violence within your context. When you look at your narrative, trust for the system, the institution becomes a key issue when it comes to addressing gender-based violence. How are the institutions ready and responsive? How are communities ready and responsive when it comes to addressing gender-based violence? You can also touch on government, how government is responsive to gender-based violence issues. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for giving me the floor again. Yeah. Sorry, I will quickly have to come back on my first intervention. I hope my English didn't send the wrong message. What my point was clearly is that I'm not saying culture is not an issue. I do believe it is, but I'm saying that we shouldn't let people continue using it as an excuse. It shouldn't be an excuse. It is not. So I just wanted to clarify that first. Then coming back on the community, if you ask me at this moment, at least in my country, communities are not protecting their members, and particularly they are not protecting enough women and girls. First, they will prevent most girls from having access to the basic right of education. And to me, that's the biggest issue, not only for the communities, but for the whole nations that we are building, if you ask me. Because how to build a nation if half of the nation is prevented from having an education? And so first, the community is not letting girls access their rights. But number two, they are not protecting them when girls and women are being rights are being violated, but also there is violence against them. Most of the time, at least in our community, they are trying to solve the issue by asking the woman to take the, how you say that, they would ask women not to talk, not to shame the community, not to shame a person, or even for herself. Supposedly, they would say that, okay, if you want to get married later, or if you want the girl, if you want to protect the girl from, not being able to getting married, then you need to let go or not say anything. Sometimes they will help the perpetrators to actually hide from the authorities. So if you're asking me today, we have a problem with our communities, and whatever is in place to support girls and women being free from violence. Now, obviously, there is more and more denunciation of what's happening, and people are starting to change a bit as far as accepting that it's not okay for at least little girls, because we hear a lot about little girls, unfortunately not yet about women or young girls, that it's not acceptable that they'll be sexually assaulted, harassed, or whatever. But then when they are, and when the families are courageous enough to denounce, there's not a proper response that's in place. Most of the time, the response is hampered by the lack of resources. They will go to the hospital or to the health practitioners, and they will be asked for money that they don't have, or the health practitioner would say that they don't have the proper kit. We call them in French, I forgot, but in English, but it's they don't have everything that they need to actually do a proper I'm sorry, I'm losing my English because I'm also doing something else, but they cannot take care properly of the victims. So if you ask me, as far as community level at this moment, the reason why probably 80% of the cases of SGBV are not getting out is because the victims are not being helped the way they are supposed to be. I'm sorry, I'm very negative about what's happening at the community level, but this is at least in my country what's happening, and it's very sad, but it's our reality. The state has been trying to improve by putting a bit more of resources, but I'm really saying a bit more because it's never enough, and it's really little compared to where they are spending their money on other subjects. So, I mean, I'm sorry to say, but as far as my country, at the community level, the response being health, social and psychological support, even economic support is not there for the victims.
Thank you very much. And we're still looking at the response and prevention. And when you look at the UN joint tools for providing essential service package to women and girls subject to violence, it talks about
yeah, that's the package I was looking for.
certain key services. It looks at health, social services, policing and justice, and it also looks at coordination, which is very important in addressing gender-based violence. Dr. Sally, I want to turn to you quickly. You want to make a comment. I want you to make a comment, but I want to find out, do we have effective survivor center response system and structures when it comes to addressing gender-based violence, particularly violence against women and girls within the African context? Do you think we have those systems? Just briefly.
Okay, I would say that coming from a country where we are experiencing an ongoing conflict, there's a lot of protocol that has been taken out of the UNFPA provisions for response to gender-based violence survivors. And I think this protocol has been developed by UNFPA following the different provisions on how to do that. Now, commonly in my community, you will hear about a one-stop shop for survivors of gender-based violence. And this one-stop shop is usually backed by a referral pathway. Now, it is believed that this referral pathway is developed by actors within those communities that are responding to survivors. So it's like a mapping of who is where and what the person is doing. So the moment you receive a survivor, you start from the entry point of the survivor. The survivor might move first to a legal institution, an institution providing legal support. So it is required that when you receive the survivor, you should immediately refer them either to the hospital so that they are given first aid, and then evidence is being collected at that level. A medical certificate is given. You take the person to a psychosocial center. That's it. That's the whole protocol. And I think with subvention and support from UNFPA, that has been done in Bamenda, in Bat, in Boya, and I think in other communities here for people who are here present, they will experience that. However, I have a worry with it, which is something I had discussed with some people back. Now, they are blending the package of mental health and psychosocial support to be given to victims. Perfect. But the question is, what is mental health to you, Gloria, in Kenya? What is mental health to you, Thywill, in Ghana? And what does it mean to Sally? Because I feel that there is still the element of contextualizing this response. Because sometimes the provisions are so blinded by our daily reality, which could be cultural, which could be religious. I love the debate about culture and religion, which is something
Thank you, Dr. Sally. I would have to cut you.
So please, a moment.
So you will land and I'll cut you. I give you 30 seconds.
Yes, 30.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is, a lot is being done, but We do not have budgetary allocations from states, like the government political will to keep these things going. I will prove that by saying that, like in my community, when I now receive survivors in my office and I call a fellow member on the referral pathway to say, okay, you are in charge in economic livelihood for survival, the response will be, oh, the project, the money finished, the project has ended, so we can't continue. So these things do exist, but sustainability is not, because we do not have plans that are backed by financial support with government will. So that's where I think Fatou was talking about what is happening in Guinea. Probably that was where her judgment was coming from.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So that is very important. The one-stop shop, which is key. In Ghana, we have a similar thing. And then government's commitment, very important for sustainability. Thank you very much. I want to quickly move to Madame Forna-Conteh, lawyer, for a quick response. When it comes to survivor, response to survivors, do we have that human rights-based approach to the response to survivors? 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you. I will take Sierra Leone as a case study. We in Sierra Leone, we do not have safe havens for women who are suffering from GBV. Most of the time, that is why they keep on succumbing to SGBV, and in some cases, they get to lose their life. And I've studied closely so many projects, and by myself, I've been trying to see what can be done. Because in most of the cases, in order for you to fight, you have to be sure that you be safe. You know, the thing in our African society, once you are married, you are giving away. There is no going back to your family. In fact, if you decide to drop off the marriage, you'll be living by yourself, except for some families who have the understanding that divorce is not a curse. Divorce is not a curse. And I think this is what we have so many legislation, we have so many policies, but none of them is paying attention to creating safe havens for survivors. None of them, in my own research, have provided.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I think I will interrupt here, but that is very important. Creating the systems and support systems to address gender-based violence is very key. As we move towards 2025, we need to be looking at those systems that need to be there for us to implement these policies. Dr. Na, we want to take a quick one from you in 30 seconds, your views on this particular subject. A very quick one.
Sister Thywill, this your 30 seconds is becoming a wahala.
A wahala, but we have 2 hours to go, you know?
I know, I got you though. So I mean, I sympathize with what Miss Fatou was talking about. I mean, I'm sitting over here, and Lawyer Conteh as well. I'm sitting over here and I'm feeling emotional here because I'm a woman, you know. So when you hear about the plight, I'm a divorced person here, and it hits a rock because I'm like, wow, you know, I mean, for the longest time, my mom was convincing me that I'm going to hell just because of the divorce. So I imagine that if I was in Ghana and I don't have the family support, you'll be forced to stay. So definitely resources, and anybody who is listening out there, any organization, any male, whatever organization that cares about human rights. We need resources in Africa. We don't need people to come and tell us what we do. As you can see, we have capable mind and we are able to do things. We need resources to take action to protect girls and to deal with the crisis that we are experiencing. And I believe that this will pass. I want to bring some positive note to the conversation that I do believe that with education, and with resources, I do believe that we will move through this because the West definitely went through their trials And as you can see in the West here, we have resources. I mean, more can be done always. And depending on where you live in the US, we have slums, we have ghettos where people are having the same responses as they are having in, you know, West Africa, in America. Trust me, it depends on where you live, right? It depends on your color of your skin. So we are having other issues, you know, so the work is not done by no means. So in Africa, we will continue, and in the West too, we will continue as a people, not only as women, but as a people, we will continue to do those work. But we need resources. So think about sending resources
on
to
that
us.
resource note. Thank you very much on that resource note. I want to go back to Ms. Hann so that she would give us her concluding perspective to all that we have said on the prevention and response to gender-based violence. Please, let's have your concluding response.
Yeah, my conclusion would just be a wrap up to insist on the fact that, as you mentioned, we need the collaboration to be better as far as actors, but also we need the state to really pitch in, not only politically in words, but with money, budgets, serious budget to support this. Because what I say oftentimes is that being a survivor or a victim is one thing, but it's what we call the double. I don't know if in English you have this term, but in French we say that there is a double pain by being a survivor and a victim and going to pay again for service and going to pay again the service provider to support us in healing from the gender-based violence. So my concluding word, would be that communities really need to understand that once you have been a victim or a survivor, the state has to pitch in and take care of you, not you having to take care of yourself again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I really appreciate the perspectives that we have all brought on board for this particular narrative. I want to quickly hand over to Dr. Gloria. So we have the last narrative and then our concluding session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thywill, and
Thank you.
I appreciate our listeners, our viewers for holding on this long. This is our last respondent to the very last narrative of the day. So I will go straight to it. It is Mrs. Forna-Conteh, and we need her to address the challenges of accessing justice for gender-based violence victims, the case of Guinea. For example, on September 27th, 2022, there's this article that has the title reading, Guinea, act now to ensure greater support and assistance for survival of sexual violence. And then further down, we're having a case where on the 28th of September, 2009, there was a massacre, and the survivors of this who are women, had to wait 13 years to get justice and to get reparation, okay? So, I mean, Ms. Fatima Conteh, as a lawyer, we need your input on this. Is there a way that the legal system can help listen to these cases and even get the confidence of women and girls to speak up without feeling threatened, without feeling ashamed of themselves? Could you please respond to this?
Yes, please. Access to justice for gender-based violence is challenging for a number of reasons in West Africa. The first thing when it comes to gender-based violence, it's reporting. It is clearly stated that when someone suffers such thing, they should report to the police. And we all know how the police work in this part of the world. The reporting will take days for it to complete. First, they will ask you to make a statement. After that, you have to bring witnesses to make a statement, and that is time-consuming. And after all of those statements, which will take weeks to a month, they would then invite the perpetrator. The perpetrator will then come to the police and make a statement. Most of the time, they do not initiate immediate arrest. They will say that they need to investigate if really there is an offense. even when sometimes when you look at the victim, you know that an offense took place. They will still insist that they have to investigate. And when it comes to the perpetrator also, they have to take statements from the perpetrator. They have to take statements from the witnesses from the perpetrator's side. After that being done, they will now say that, okay, now we have everything together, we have evidence together. And when it's come to evidence, another thing that is causing delay in the justice system, they do not have forensic instruments when they are trying to gather evidence. Because I've been following up closely with Western countries like the USA and others. When it comes to forensic, when you see a rape victim and a report of being raped, of course, you take a sample of semen. In this part of the world, we do not have that. The only thing that they will do, they will physically examine you from the outside. If you have torn dress, and then a medical doctor will then examine the vagina if there is any swelling or redness. And then we have, I say sometimes, we have some gentle rapists. Some women, they cannot fight. So most of the time, if you are looking for redness, wellness, that you will not find in the victim. But if there is advanced equipment to check for semen, that would be better. And then after all of that, after collecting reports and collecting evidence, they will now say that they have to send the reports to the director of public prosecution. That again will take months, sometimes years, for them to go over the file and say, okay, there's an offense, we have to charge for this offense. After that, imagine now, the victim is being tortured for months waiting for justice. After that, then we move to the court proceedings. For the court proceedings in this part of the world, it's sad. I must say it's sad. You'll be going to court for 6 months, 1 year, sometimes 2 years, 3 years. You'll be going to court in order for you to get justice. And in doing so, imagine you have to pay transportation. You have to pay transportation for your victims and all of that. So by the time you get justice, sometimes it's up to 4 years, 5 years. I've been doing some cases since I passed my bar exam that I'm yet to get justice for. And everything that we need to get justice is inside the file. But the courts keep adjourning and adjourning and adjourning and all. Another major challenge is when it comes to this, awareness. Most of the time, people think that the only sexual offense is rape. We have harassment. We have incest. I once met a girl at the age of 12 who thought that it was okay for her to have sex with her dad because the man she's having sex with is her dad. And she has been brainwashed that it's okay. In fact, he should be the first person, and because he's the one taking care of her. So awareness again, because most of the time when we have these government projects, when we have NGOs coming, they will rent these fancy halls, invite a lot of these government officials and other people. When they come, even the means of communication, most of the people suffering from these offenses do not even understand the English language. So when they come and engage them, they will be speaking, using jargons. At the end of the day, the victims will carry nothing home. They will not understand nothing that took place. In fact, recently we had this workshop sponsored by UNCDF, and to my surprise, we had this work plan where we go to the community and we decided to teach them in our local languages. We have the Timni, the Mende, the Susu, and then we taught them in our local languages. To our surprise, we had over 50 victims coming out. I was assaulted by my brother. I was also assaulted by my neighbors. They started coming out. They told us that this is the first time I understand. People have been coming to our community. In fact, we see the big banners by big organizations who've been pouring millions of dollars, and yet still there were victims in the community. So lack of awareness is a serious challenge. Another thing is stigma. Stigma is another serious challenge when it comes to gender-based violence. We have some communities where the mom will tell the child that if you talk that you're a rape victim, who will marry you? Who will want to be your wife? who want to take a rape victim as a wife, please don't say anything. For the sake of our family name, for the sake of my name, I beg you in the name of God. And that is why most of the time, for these perpetrators, the moment that they know that they are safe, they will start with maybe the elder sister, and then they will jump to the younger sisters. And that is how it will go on and on and on and on. Another major challenge is financial barriers. Like I said earlier, going to the police station to make reports costs money. We do not have free public buses and stuff like that. We do not. Even for the school buses, you have to pay something. No matter how little it is, you have to pay something. So most of the time when these victims, they go to the police station once, twice, and then they are done. So I have to be calling them, please, can you come and complete your statement? They say, I really want to come, but I do not have transportation. I do not have money to pay for transport. Sometimes as lawyers, we have to help them because for my own organization, we are working purely on pro bono. So sometimes we have to take our own personal resources to help them that please just come and complete your statement so we can prosecute this matter. And then when it comes to the states, taking Sierra Leone as a case study, because this is what I know about the most. When it comes to the states, one major help that this victim gets from the state is state prosecution, but because when it comes to GBV, they are state offenses. So we cannot prosecute them on our own except we get a fiat from the Attorney General office. So most of the time, these cases are prosecuted by the state, but however, as lawyers, we do associate with them. So when we are associating with these police officers, bringing these victims to court, they do not have money. They do not have the financial means to make themselves available in court. And the court is located for Sierra Leone from Freetown. It is located in the central district, meaning you have to pay sometimes up to $2. And most of these families, they do not even make $50 for months as salary. Talk less of paying $2 every 2-3 days to come to court. And another challenge that we do face when it comes to this is lack of trust. There was an incident where some group of women protested against the government and some of them were arrested. And they alleged that they were raped by the police officers. They allege. I took their statements, and when we were ready to prosecute, they all disappeared. So lack of trust. So most of the time when they are suffering these offenses, when you tell them, oh, come, let's come and prosecute, I will help them, I will help you, they will tell you, no, I'm not interested. At the end of the day, I don't want to start halfway and stop. It will create great danger in my life if I stop halfway. And another major challenges that we are facing is lack of training. Most of these police officers that do prosecute these offenses, they were just trained on general basis how to prosecute. They do not have the expertise on how to prosecute when it comes to gender-based violence. They do not even know how to treat the victims. However, when it comes to rape, thank God for the former Chief Justice that we have. We now have what we call the dark curtains, where the victim will sit behind a dark curtain and then they will feel free to tell their stories, and they will be the first person to go into the court, and then they will be the first person to leave before the court session ends. So I think that is a great improvement for one side in the justice system, because when they brought this black curtain, now we do have a lot of victims because they feel protected when telling their stories. And like I stated earlier, another major challenge that we have is out of court settlements. It is prohibited in our laws. It is prohibited in our laws in the Sexual Offense Act of 2019. It is prohibited, but however, we do have these stubborn religious leaders, community stakeholders, that they will go behind our backs to negotiate with the victims and their parents, even though they know it is prohibited by law. And it is an offense that you'll be charged for and be jailed for up to 10 years, but yet still. And most of the time, the challenges that we face as lawyers will be prosecuting, everything will be going well, and then the victim will just disappear. they will just disappear. You will search for them and search, they will not be found. Because most of the time they get compensated with money. They get compensated with money, they get compensated. There was another victim which I had was compensated with a car. The father took a car from the perpetrator. And then they disappeared into thin air. It was after 6 months or so. I went to the judge and told him that I found this victim, we need to prosecute. She came once and then she disappeared now forever. I'm yet to find her. So that is another thing. Another serious challenge that we are facing in the justice system, like I stated earlier, a survival center. In Sierra Leone, we do not have a single survival center. And most of this time, when we were doing this UNCDF workshop, I came across a girl who was 10 years old. After the engagement we had with them in class, we met them in school. This 10 years old girl asked me, she said that, Auntie, if I'm being abused by a family member, let's say my grandfather, what should I do? I told them, oh, you can report to the police and then we'll help you to prosecute. And then she said, if I tell the police that my grandfather is abusing me, it simply means that I'll be disowned. Who will be the one to take care of me and send me to school after this? I was too stunned to speak, considering her age and the question that she asked. And then I said, give me 5 minutes. I will talk to you. I have a few friends working in these safe homes for children. I made few calls and said, oh, I have a victim who is 10 years. She's been abused by the grandfather. Do you have space? Can you please take her in? And they told me we are full to the brim. And we only have about two or three of those homes here in Sierra Leone. I had to go back to the girl and said, trust me, do not succumb to this abuse for the rest of your life. Just come and report, and by God's grace, you'll be taken care of. I've searched, but we do not have homes at the moment. And then she looked at me on the face and said, Auntie, me, I want to be educated. I want to go to school. There is no way I can say this and stop going to school. In fact, it is not even that painful. At that age, she's 10. On that day, I cried like a baby. She said, it is not even that painful now, meaning it has been going on for some time. And she has succumbed to it because there is no resources to help her out of it. I took it upon myself and then I reported to the police. When she was taken to the police, she denied. She said, I never told you that. I never told you I was being abused by my grandfather. After the whole saga, I took her again and I said, why did you deny? She said, Auntie, if I say that, I'll be thrown out of the house and I still want to go to school. I cannot accept and say this, knowing fully well I do not have help. I said, okay, I understand. And then we left. So these are some of the sad realities and challenges we are facing in the justice system. Imagine 13 years after the massacre in Guinea, 13 years, waiting for justice for 13 good years. And when you check all of these, the court system, the delay upon delay, adjournment upon adjournment, most of these victims, they even die before judgments. If you check, most of them even died. And at the end of the day, when you read these judgments, they are not in line with the offense. For 13 years, the perpetrator was living their lives. Because even when, for me, I say even they are sent to prison, they get fed off taxpayers' money. And then it's a slap on the victim face. The challenges are too much when it comes to the legal system. And even the attitude, sometimes the attitude of even the people working in the court system, in the police, they will be the one to take pictures, to take videos. Because most of these settings, they're enclosed sittings, and yet still you get to see videos and pictures in the public. How did they get there? How did they get there in the first place if these pictures and videos are not taken by the people that we work with in the first place?
Okay.
It's a lot. I'll stop here. It's a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lawyer Fatima. You've given us very clear case studies and you've outlined the the difficulties to have these issues addressed in the legal system. So just very briefly, because we are watching on the time now, we just have about 15 minutes to go. I'll just go to each panelist. We'll start with Dr. Sally. You complained about 30 seconds, so I'll give it 1 minute. What do you have to say about Fatima's submission?
We talked and all of us were jovial, happy, but she got me to a very emotional and deep place because that's where the whole issue lies. Constraint to justice is linked to food, just bread that has to enter the mouth. Constraint to justice is linked to power imbalance, where justice is for the rich and the poor people lick their wounds. I listened to her keenly and I could see my community clearly. If you followed Cameroon in the last 3 or 4 months, or maximum 6, there was this campaign calling on the arrest of one young man within Cameroon, which it was alleged that he had raped and assaulted over 200 women. And to tell you the truth, when the women who came forth, 7 of them, put their story out there, they went to the justice system. Unfortunately for them, envelopes changed hands and the questions that were being asked became something else. So on a more positive note, I would want to say that consciousness is coming, a lot of awareness, which I feel that from Fatima's submission, she's telling us as actors here present, those listening to us on the live stream, to start seeing the kind of programming we can do if we really want to address these issues and get justice. If you realize that your victim or survivor will not show up because of hunger, let your package have provision for feeding. If you realize that your victim will not show up because they are afraid of stopping their education, let scholarship be part of it. Thank you, Fatima, for making us understand that legal support to survivors must be a holistic package. It's not a standalone action. We need to attach it to other things. I look forward to when people in our community, especially government, will be intentional about resources allocated to respond to these grave human rights violations. Because if we have the right resources, we will get there. We cannot leave everything in the hands of international partners, donor organizations who come into our country because of specific projects. We need to have governments that are sensitive. Unfortunately, I talk and feel like crying because the budget of my country came out last week and the Ministry of Gender had the list of the money allocated to them. So I think that's a story for every other country.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your submission. We quickly move to Dr. Na. Just 1 minute.
Yay. 30 to 1 minute. Okay. So actually, Miss Sally, you have spoken a lot of my mind. So from what you said, to be honest, I think my whole day is messed up now. I'm actually thinking that I wish I didn't come here because no. It's a good thing I came, but sometimes it's just rough, it's rough to put yourself in the shoes of that 10-year-old child. And Lawyer Conteh, I'm telling you, you are doing some work because I don't know if I have the heart for it because it's really rough on me. I just want everybody, I'm just gonna end with what I started with. Every man, you have a mother, a woman gave birth to you. You have a daughter someday, maybe. You have a sister, or you have a cousin who is female. The problem is your problem also. So please, speaking to the leaders in West Africa and our continent, please, the police, the law enforcement community really need to get involved in training in terms of how to deal with gender-based violence, sexual-based violence. It's something that just has to be done. And then for the community who cares about children and women and just human rights activities, please support. We need the survival centers. some of the things that we have in the US that I think have really, really played a role in the dealing with this gender-based violence and sexual-based violence is domestic violence shelters where women can go, and it's locked to the community. They are protected. When children have to go to courts, their identities are, protected. And we really need to start doing that in the West African context and the content as a whole. We need to protect victims' identities. And lastly, we really, as a community, really need to work to take away the stigma, because it's really annoying to think that somebody victimized you and you get to pay the price and they just, and everybody else, and even you lose the ability to get married because somebody raped you when you were young. Okay. Yeah. So if I can't stop in the 1 minute, but I'm going to stop here. But again, I'm going to say, you're a man, wherever you are, listen, you have a sister, you have a cousin, you have somebody who you care for who is a female. So this is your problem also. So step up. And that's where I'm going to stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Then lastly, we have Ms. Fatou, Hann, your submission in a minute in reaction to what Lawyer Conteh has just told us. If she's still in, Fatou, I can see she's muted.
She said she might be having challenges. So
okay. Okay, so if that's the case, I'd like to ask Lawyer Conteh to just take a minute and give your final submission to this, close it up before we open it for general questions.
My final submission would be, we need resources in Africa. We need resources for this self-shelter. Because when we look at progress that is making place in the Western world, it's because that these women are sure that if they leave this shelter, and mind you, there are some women with kids. So sometimes living by yourself, you can simply stay with a friend, but living when you have a kid and knowing fully well that you do not have a shelter will make you succumb to this violence. So we need resources for that. And there are so many legal frameworks. We have so many international and national legislations. We have to keep enforcing them. We have to have projects wherein we sensitize the public about them, because there is no use in having a law that the public have no idea about what is inside it. Most of the time when we have these NGOs coming in, all of these fast donors coming in, they do not focus in educating the people about these acts, and yet still they want to protect them from the offenses inside these acts. How will they be protected without knowing the offenses? Mm-hmm. So we do need that.
Okay.
And also, last thing, we need policies in place. We need more policies in place. It will never be enough to protect women and children, because when you bring this, they'll find a way to circumvent it and bring that. So that it's a cycle that will never end.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that. And as we protect the women and the girls, we also have it in mind that we need to protect the boys and the men, but we will have another edition for that one. So we have come to the end of the submissions, and we allowed for questions to be typed in the comments. I believe we have a few questions. And then Thywill is also there on the other end. I don't know if she has anything to say. Otherwise, we can open up for any of the viewers. If you want to ask a question, as we assemble the ones you've written in the messages, you can just raise your hand and we'll have you go ahead. Thywill.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Gloria, Ajami. Now, we had one question. The call said, interesting finding, curious about how cost is measured in the said studies, talking about the cost of SGBV on national GDP, the statistics that was mentioned. We will link you up to Dr. Quaye. But before then, I would like to say that the cost incorporates a lot of components. And in some contexts, they look at the number of productive hours that is lost through gender-based violence could be a factor. The cost of health and other services related to gender-based violence, and then even the cost of individual investments into treatment for gender-based violence. So different components come together to calculate the cost from different contexts. But we will link you up to Doc, and then we'll pick up that conversation from there. I think we've come a long way, and I have a very important question for our panelists. I just want to find out from you briefly whether you think that Africa is really prepared for the AU Convention on the elimination of violence against women and girls come February 2025. Very brief. Yes, we are prepared. No, we are not prepared, because I think we've highlighted a lot of the issues. So we'll take a quick one from each of you. And then as you come, I want you to quickly add if your organization is doing something on engaging government and other agencies, what you are doing on that score. You just add that briefly for us. So I'll start from Dr. Sally. Yes?
Okay.
Brief one.
I want to think that next year's endorsement of whatever agreement on AU agenda on violence against women will be another lip service. Just reading through this document, there are no accountability and control mechanism attached to it. And maybe I still need to get a better and deeper copy. Dr. Gloria and others here, please share, so that I should be speaking with truth. If we continue to enact these things and adopt them and ratify them, like we've done with other protocols and conventions, then nothing is really going to change. Because one thing is evident, the political will of every government is what makes violence against women and girls well tackled by that state. If we look at countries that have gone ahead, that's it. For my organization, I do a lot of localization work. We are working to localize women, peace, and security in our communities. And our focus is having local action plans in different communities. And most of our local action plans are coincidentally discussing issues of gender-based violence in different forms and shades. So that's how far we are taking the work, because it's not just the policy up there, but it's also the action at the grassroots level.
Thank you very much. So I'll move on to Dr. Dr. Hann. Is it Doctor? Miss Hann? Yes.
I'm not a doctor. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was a bit cut off. Can you please repeat the question? Sorry.
Okay, so I just want to know how prepared we are as a continent for the convention come February. Are we prepared?
The convention in February, you got cut off. I'm sorry. Are we prepared as a continent for the convention?
On elimination of violence against women and girls. There's been a lot of negotiations, and we're hoping that by February next year, the convention will be adopted. Do you think we are prepared?
I think we are prepared as far as advocacy, but I think that we still have a lot of work on the ground. Because if you ask me, someone said it earlier, and I think it was our sister lawyer, she was saying that we have all that we need as far as the framework, legal and political framework, but then it doesn't translate for the victims and the survivors. They hear big words, They see pictures, they see us on TV, and then their plight doesn't change so much. They still don't have the services to go to and the like. So I'm an impact person. I'm more looking at I'm a people's person also. I'm more looking at the human and the people than the political. So I always feel bad, but I know that we need to keep pushing. And I feel that from at least what I've heard this evening from all the sisters, the engagement, the work they're doing, we're all doing, even sometimes at our own risk as far as well-being, we are ready. We are ready.
Thank
and
you.
we'll go and fight for it and get it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lawyer Conteh. Just 30 seconds.
Yeah, to be honest, it's really hard to say if we are ready, considering that we are signatory to many conventions already, including CEDAW, and yet we are yet to see meaningful impacts. And for me, this is just an addition to the bunch that we already have. Like I stated earlier, the legal frameworks are here. We have so many of them, so many conventions that sometimes we cannot even recall that we are signatory to this convention. And also some of these conventions have been domesticated into our system, but yet still we have little or nothing to show for it. I am just being hopeful as a lawyer, because at the end of the day, after signing this convention, yet still we get to deal with the victim again. I'm just being hopeful that after signing this convention, things will be put in place to educate the people. Resources will be provided for them in order for this convention to be effective, because it is just words on paper until you implement it.
Thank you.
So I'm being
Thank
hopeful.
you very much. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're
So we
welcome.
take the last word from Dr. Kotey. Your brief final word
My 30
on
seconds.
whether
Okay.
we are prepared.
So I just want to say that I guess it's more of a suggestion. Like Lawyer Conteh said, and I think Miss Fatou said this. Well, no, she's ready. But I think yes, we've been ready, to be honest. I mean, because all these issues have been spoken about and about. I would suggest that instead of all the preparations and all the money that will go into that big conference, please let's put the money towards action activities, so that the money will go to, the victim packages and survivor packages and what else. I'm not saying that we should throw away the agenda. We can do the agenda. We can even do a conference on Zoom or whatever. But please, the transportation, donate all that money and let's get it to the victims so that we can get people reporting and doing the work that's on the ground. Okay? All right? Done.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us on this call. Thank you to all our panelists for those wonderful perspectives. And as we said from the beginning, these are personal and individual perspectives. It does not represent organizational perspectives. And so those who have to speak on behalf of their organizations, they made it clear to us. And so we thank you all for joining us. I want to find out, Dr. Quaye, if you have anything to say on the call, or if there are any questions, then I don't see any hands up. So I think we want to close the chapter. If Doc, you have anything to contribute or say?
No, yeah, I just want to remind our listeners that next week, Friday, we'll be moving to East Africa, right? So we have the program set up already. So
Doc, you're a bit faint. We can't hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please. Yeah. Please speak up a bit.
Yeah, I'm saying that I want our listeners to know that next week, Friday, we'll be going to East Africa, right? So those of them who are here who would like to join us next week, Friday, will be grateful to have them, right? So I'll push it over to Dr. Ajami to give us the closing remarks.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Quaye. I asked our viewers to raise hands, but I just realized that there's no button like that down here. So just one chance. If anyone has a question they would like to ask, could you just unmute and ask? In case there's someone who has a burning question that they need responded to in a minute, then we close. Because there's a chat option also. Okay, so far there's nothing. Thank you very much, our viewers, our participants, our panelists for these very worthwhile contributions to this program. We have actually in very many ways addressed issues that affect both men and women, even though the panelists are all female. The last panelist, for example, lawyer Conteh, has spoken as a lawyer, not as a woman. So we have all these perspectives. It does not matter from whom it comes, rather it is what they are saying or their opinions and their submissions about the topic that counts. So I'm so grateful. I'm looking forward to you joining me for the East African version on it. And we promise you that we'll have a mixed gender panel, so don't worry about that. And I wish you all a blessed night and see you next time. Goodbye.
See you. Bye.
Mm-hmm.
See you all.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Bye.
Mm-hmm.
Nice meeting everyone. Looking forward to continue the conversation.
Yeah, looking forward
Nice
to.
meeting you too.
And thanks for being here. Mm-hmm.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for coming. Bye.